Hello, this is Laura Adams, Literacy Consultant at the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. Welcome to this session from DPI's 2014 Wisconsin Literacy Unconference, DIBELS Next and Connections to Instruction. This session specifically focuses on the use of DIBELS Next in grades kindergarten and 1, and how DIBELS Next fits into a balanced early literacy assessment system. And again, I am pleased to welcome back Amy McGovern, reading specialist in the Wausau School District, who will be sharing this information today. Thank you, Amy.
Welcome. Hello, everyone. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. The DIBELS Next Connections to Instruction information I'm going to share. We're going to look through just a few pieces of progress monitoring information, and the real essential goal of this is to talk about what do you do with the students who are struggling, who are still in the red zone, still in the yellow zone. So that's kind of where the bulk of the information will be shared. And most of this is coming from my experience in the Wausau School District and as a consultant for many years prior to that, and as a classroom teacher too. Okay, so why use DIBELS Next? Just to remind everyone, the purpose again is to identify those students who may be at risk for reading failure and to help provide some instructional support for them that's targeted to their area of need. The advantages of using this system versus others, it's very sensitive to small changes in children's growth. So as a result, it's very useful in terms of our whole RTI decision-making process. And the measures are valid and reliable. I also am a huge fan of large norm samples, which DIBELS, AIMSweb, and DIBELS Next, they all come from the same family of research, the same body of researchers, developed all three of those assessments. And so their base of students that they draw from to create this norm sample is hundreds of thousands deep, which helps us really trust the information we're getting. Okay, so there are, in the age of teacher effectiveness, some reasons why we might want to talk about appropriate and inappropriate uses of DIBELS information, and certainly it is appropriate to use as the screener it's designed for, to find those students who may be at risk for reading failure, and to monitor them once we've determined the plan of instruction. But it's not appropriate to label, track, or grade students based on the progress in DIBELS. So that would not be an appropriate use for these measures. They're not designed for that. And we also don't want to make any large, high-stakes decisions off of a screener. Again, the screener is what it is, and the progress monitoring tool is useful, but it should always be surrounded by other pieces of data, writing, diagnostic information, classroom observation. So you're never looking at just your DIBELS, and if you're making decisions solely on your DIBELS information, then you're missing the point. You've got to be always triangulating your data and confirming and disconfirming what you're seeing. From a systems level, DIBELS is very useful for helping you to see if what you're doing in your core instruction is really having a tremendous impact or not. So if you have high levels of students in the at-risk for some risk range, in a grade level, in a classroom, in your school, in your district, that's a red flag that something may not be going on well with the core curriculum. So, and I'm cautious in saying the teaching and more saying the curriculum surrounding it, because the tools we're using and the knowledge that we're pulling from informs our teaching. And so there may need to be a need for a systems change if you're not seeing the results. So we don't want to evaluate teachers using any of this information from DIBELS or AIMSweb, and we're not going to make decisions about funding with this information, nor would we ever reward or punish a student based on their progress in DIBELS or lack of progress. So these are early literacy measures, and they, very much like going to the doctor, we are going to take a dipstick look into how a student is doing with their overall literacy instruction by narrowing the lens and looking at a few specific things. So today's presentation will focus on the real early literacy indicators, phoneme segmentation and first sound fluency, are phonemic awareness indicators. And then we have nonsense word fluency, which really is a strong indicator of how effective your phonics program is being delivered, or instruction. It's not a program. If the instruction is being delivered well and you're following the tenets of reading science, then students should be able to read those lists of nonsense words, and they should be able to attack them the way they would any other word they're not sure of. So if you're seeing hesitancy in how students are addressing those nonsense words, that should be a red flag on how you're approaching word solving in general, because any word you don't know might as well be a nonsense word, right? So we should be looking at it beginning, middle, end, and using what we know about the consonants and the vowels to help us decode that word. Okay, so oral reading fluency and days were covered in a different presentation, but those specific ones are getting at advanced phonics and word attack skills, and there is a high correlation between oral reading fluency and reading comprehension. So especially when you factor in accuracy, that's the driving factor there. Scarborough's rope is a wonderful illustration of the complexity of reading and the need to teach to both language comprehension and word recognition. So at kindergarten and first grade, we are laying the foundation at the word recognition level with all of our word work that we're doing, with the phonemic awareness activities and all of the letter sound and letter word and sight word reading. All of those pieces are laying the alphabetic principle down for the student in a way that they can understand and generalize. The language comprehension at K and 1 is really taught through your read-alouds and through all of the wonderful shared reading and writing experiences that are going on in your classroom on a daily basis. That's where you're developing their vocabulary, their oral language, their expressive language, through that whole group and small group instruction that's capitalizing on text that's much too hard for them to read, but that you're bringing to life for them. So at K1, it's important to distinguish how that teases out, which is different than at the other grades where you can fold in the word recognition and the language within one lesson in a deeper way than perhaps at K and 1. Okay, so just a reminder that of all the struggling readers, what we know about them, 80% struggle with both decoding and comprehension, 80%. And this research is coming from Motes and a meta-analysis that's been done by many researchers. She just compiled and reported out that 80% struggle with both decoding and comprehension. Good for you to know, because you're laying that groundwork, especially on the decoding side of it, and building their language through oral language development. Only 12 to 15 struggle with decoding, poor decoding and good comprehension. So that's a lot of dyslexic students that fit this definition. They have a hard time pulling the text off the page and reading it on their own, but it's read to them. They have no trouble understanding. And finally, only 5% really struggle with good decoding and poor comprehension. So that's a very tiny number. Usually teachers say, oh, they don't have any decoding issues, they just can't comprehend. But truthfully, that's only 5% of the students. That's what research has shown. So think about your role in terms of establishing those foundational skills and what can be done to support the early literacy to prevent what we're seeing in that slide. So instructional recommendations from DIBELS. We are looking at the composite score, and that's going to shake down into 3 categories: at-risk, intensive, which is our most severe needs; some-risk strategic, which is kids who may need some support; and finally, those kids who are low risk and benchmark, needing just core instruction. Here's a chart that shows that composite score at the bottom. So this should be what you're looking at. That instructional recommendation piece is the driver that helps you determine how effective your system is and whether perhaps it needs to be evaluated for any kind of change. Especially this time of year, it's a really good time of year in the spring to look back and see who's really still stuck and why, and what could be the reason for that. Because if students have met that composite score benchmark at K-1 or any of the other grades, there's an 80 to 90% likelihood that the core is working great for them and nothing needs to change. If they're below benchmark, then there's 40 to 60% chance that they're going to need additional support, and the likelihood of them passing their state standardized test is within that range, 40 to 60%, if they're scoring in that strategic area. And finally, the bottom, the most at-risk students, the odds of them passing their state standardized test drops to below 20%, and they need intensive support, which might probably need to move all the way through the tiers. Tier 1, 2, Tier 2, 3 really needs to be aligned for them so that they're not being asked to learn to read in two different systems. That's definitely not helpful for struggling new readers or any readers. So the drivers for progress monitoring, it's good to know if you are only looking at the composite score, you may miss that what is really driving the scores for progress monitoring in spring and for kindergarten is phoneme segmentation fluency and also nonsense word fluency with the correct letter sound being said. That's what you're really listening for. These two with nonsense word fluency actually is 1 point higher than phoneme segmentation, which in the past it was phoneme segmentation means to say kind of drove the train for kindergarten. That was the goal because it's so predictive for later literacy. And what they're saying today, the new research is suggesting that both of these pieces matter and that we should really be attending to our data very closely for these two, nonsense word fluency, correct letter sound to kindergarten, and phoneme segmentation. First grade, by the end, this time of the school year, where we want to see kids transitioning from correct letter sound into whole words read. But be careful, the thing to be cautious of is prompting the students to read the whole word. Excuse me, I'm getting a little hoarse. If you are, what you want to be watching for is the students to be showing you when they're ready. So if they're sounding everything out on that nonsense word fluency, you know, and that's all they're doing, you let them continue to do that, especially on the test. And you know that during instruction, that's where you're going to be coaching the students to be blending the words and saying it fast. And if your instruction is strong and is having a positive impact, the next time you give a progress monitoring tool or a benchmark, you should start to see more children trying to read the whole word. But you have to let kids work through that phase because pushing them before they're ready to read the whole word is almost like pushing them into errors. So we must be cautious of that. Here's a progress monitoring booklet, which many of you are probably using these paper booklets, and some have transitioned. In our district, we require teachers to do it online. We ask them to do it online because we can have access to those graphs and compile data really quickly when it's scored online, but it's possible to do it paper pencil as well. Okay, so keeping in mind that you are laying the ground floor at K-1 for those strategies to take hold in the upper grades, remember that laying those decoding and alphabetic principle strategies down well and really teaching carefully the principle is so important because once they get past us, second grade, it doesn't matter what strategies we teach them from comprehension. If they can't read the word, they're stuck. So why do we test for phoneme segmentation fluency? Because phonological awareness is so powerful. It's such a powerful predictor. In preschool and kindergarten, it really is a strong predictor for how well a child will comprehend text read silently in later years. Phonological awareness, that's how powerful it is. And we know that interventions that can improve it really do lead to improved reading abilities. So how many minutes a day do you need to spend on phonological awareness? 20 minutes a day is all that needs to be spent on phonological awareness, and not all at once. It can be peppered in throughout the day. This is a helpful chart from the Next Steps in Literacy book that shows the progression of phoneme awareness issues and skills, starting with easiest and moving to the hardest. Important to point out that deletion and substitution at the bottom of this chart really don't get under control until like second grade. So at kindergarten and first grade, you want to be focusing on isolating the sound, what's the first sound in sun, identifying it, categorizing, blending, and segmenting. And blending and segmenting are really the goal. Deleting and so forth, those have more to do with the relationship to spelling and the need to substitute or delete sounds to create a new word. So here's an example of first sound fluency, the way you would be giving it, and the score sheet. Helpful to know that the students on the first, they get 2 points if they can isolate the first sound, and they get only 1 point if they make the first two sounds together, and no points if they add the vowel sound to it. So in most cases. Okay, and here's phoneme segmentation. Again, scoring. And the nice thing about DIBELS Next is you get this wonderful qualitative chart that lets you make a note about what else the student is doing in terms of how they are attacking the word. And I think from a teaching standpoint, building strategies based off of what you're seeing from this response pattern is tremendously useful during the professional learning community experience. These were supposed to be hot links to 3 different teaching routines for supporting phoneme segmentation fluency. And these are right from the Florida Center for Reading Research. The first one is on isolating the sound, then blending, and the last one is on segmenting. And these 3 routines sound very similar to the way the test is given in DIBELS. But remember that the goal here is really to teach broadly and test narrowly. So a strong phonological awareness and phonemic awareness and phonics instruction at K-1, you're going to include snippets of these experiences because you're playing with words. But that's not the only thing you want to be doing, because then it's too narrow of a lens for students. So ways to help students master phonological awareness is to really model proper pronunciation of standard English, first of all. Ask them to repeat new vocabulary. Every time you're introducing new language, they should be speaking routinely, and you want to be talking about and doing a think aloud on what your mouth is doing to produce the word. Over-articulating, helping them feel it. Mirrors are a wonderful thing to have handy in your classroom. Hold them up to have the kids watch themselves make those sounds, and you will see they will become very aware of what their mouth is doing, and that will support their phonological awareness development and lead into all the other pieces. So, and if you've got a speech path in your building, by all means, you want to connect with them. So we'll come back to some more tips on phoneme segmentation shortly. The other side, the reason we work on phonological awareness and phonemic awareness is really to address the other side of the coin, phonics. And so nonsense word fluency is that dipstick measure into your phonics program. How are kids, or your phonics instruction in general, how are they doing with sounding out words that they don't know? What kinds of errors are they making? Do they miss the vowel sounds only? Do they reverse their B and D sounds? So the more you know about linguistics and the way the sounds are formed, the more diagnostic you can be when looking at this assessment, and that can help you select other pieces of information to dig into and find out what else is going on as a student. Again, use that qualitative sheet at the bottom to really fill in and document what the students are doing to sound out the words. How are they attacking the words? And I'm just going to briefly mention high-frequency words and sight words as a caution. We know from eye movement research that students look at every single letter when they read the word, that we all do. We look at every letter, we just do it really fast once we are proficient readers. And that research comes from Rayner, if anybody wants to check the facts on that. I encourage you to do so. And what we know then is if we look at every letter and we want kids to move left to right through the word, and we know the phonological awareness asks them to look first at the beginning sound, and then they have to secure ending sound, and then we look at the middle sound because it's the hardest. Where does that leave the introduction of what we would think of sight words, the 100 list of most commonly read words and so forth? And most of those words, 75% of what's on those DOLPS word lists, actually are decodable. So you really only want to ask kids to memorize those 25 that are very, very irregular, with the word of being a very good example. OF, neither of those letters say the sound that is being asked of them in the word of. So that tiny number would be all that would need to be memorized, and you would want to encourage that training to come after they've secured some early literacy skills with sounding out and really connecting speech to print in a really logical way. So much of what I'm sharing is in the Next Steps in Literacy book from Susan Smart and Deborah Glasser. It's an excellent resource connected to DIBELS and Ames Web and DIBELS Next. So if you're looking for more details on any of the things I'm sharing, I highly encourage this resource. Here are just some things that are mentioned within Susan Smart's book. From the phonemic awareness side, the more we can get kids to play with language, thinking about spreading those 20 minutes across the day, rhyme and alliteration, warming up the mouth, and having fun with language. The name game, which of course would be saying a name like Sarah, and everybody says their name, but we're going to replace the first sound with another sound. So if we're using the T sound, then Sarah becomes Tara, and Amy becomes Tammy, and so forth. And the kids go around saying one another's names with that new sound. Great way to build phonemic awareness, and that game is in the book. The stretch and say, again, getting the students to stretch out the word and snap it back. Again, that's blending and then segmenting, putting it back together. All phonemic awareness, all getting them ready for phonics down the road. Using your read aloud to point out the first sound of interesting words, to get the kids to say the word. The more oral language we get, the better. So these are all tips to help build phonemic awareness, getting the kids to say it with you, say it soft and sweet, say it loud and proud, say it like a witch, like a pirate, all the voices, wonderful ways to get kids to practice those sounds. And finally, your phonics needs to be systematic, sequential, and intentional especially for the students who are in the bottom in that red zone area. But the research suggests that this type of instruction that includes cumulative review and really carefully connecting letter sounds benefits all students, and that even the high kids who catch on quickly, they may need less repetition, but they're coming at the language and the processing of print in a way that is very logical and allows them to succeed very quickly. So it's good for all kids. And whiteboards, of course, tremendously useful to do things like this. Little build-up activity with the little kindergartner here in her own hand, writing bug, rug, mug, and then she's got the at words in the other list. It's a child from the kindergarten intervention group in one of our schools in the district. So the more you can get kids to, as it says on here, connect the letter sound with the actual letter, writing it and reading it, you're securing all those different things inside the brain, and then reading a story that includes those same words and getting the connected text in there and talking about what they're reading, looking at the picture, describing the vocabulary, all wonderful ways to connect the dots in their systematic and sequential instruction. Okay. These are some resources for you. I highly recommend the Florida Center for Reading Research. We'll hot link this for you so you can get into that site if you haven't done so. They literally have files devoted by grade level to the separate areas, phonemic awareness, phonics, and all the way up, vocabulary, phonics, oral language, you name it, it's in there. And they're ready to go, printable activities that can be done tomorrow and that have been field tested. So that's a great source. And then these other ones too provide great resources. Reading Rockets has wonderful video demonstrations of phonemic awareness and phonics lessons that I highly recommend viewing as a great grade level team to get some good ideas. Okay, there's a chart from DIBELS Next showing all the cut scores, and remember that we really need to be thinking about our instruction, and if our instruction is working, then the students' progress monitoring charts are going to show that. And if it's not, then it's time to come back to books like Student Smarts and dig in and see what else can be done to make an impact and change those trajectories, because students really can. What we know with certainty is that your instruction matters, and that's taking the time to learn well yourself absolutely improves student outcomes. So thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me through WASA. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your knowledge and expertise in this area. And I really want to encourage viewers to make sure that you check out the supplementary resources that have been posted right alongside of this webinar. And there you'll be able to find the exact links that were referenced in Amy's presentation today. Thank you.